Greetings, fellow mortals. For the most part, I've always found that characters are the most important aspect of every story. This includes horror and scary tales. Sometimes, however, the setting is far more important than the plot or the people involved with the tale. Because if the setting doesn't work in a horror story, then everything falls apart. Why are the characters even there in the first place? Why don't they just leave? Why are the antagonists or monsters even in this location? Does it all make sense? Because that's the thing about scary stories. In order to be terrifying, they have to make at least a little sense. That's part of the reason why I rarely find zombies to be scary. After all, they're close to impossible. Once a body dies, its muscles rapidly degrade. There's no way for them to move. Unless, of course, the zombies aren't actually dead and are just infected with something. Oddly enough, I find The Last of Us and Days Gone zombies to be the most compelling out of most versions, just because it's possible that a massive disease, mutated fungus, or a strange outbreak could cause mass destruction. I think that we all know that humanity can't handle epidemics in any way whatsoever. We suck at dealing with those. With this in mind, the thing that shatters a story for me is if the reasoning behind something doesn't exactly make sense. And we all know that's a trope in horror movies. The characters are stuck somewhere because of a storm or an accident. Instead of sticking together, they spread out and get killed off by whatever is hunting them. They make stupid decision after stupid decision. Now, you could just explain making sense in a story with the writing quality, but I think that in spooky tales, it comes down to the importance of the setting. Something about the location around the characters has to compel them to make decisions that put them into more trouble. In a way, the setting has to grow into something more important. It has to put obstacles in the way of the protagonists. It has to feel alive and malicious. Let me use the example of one of my favorite movies. The Shining is one of the few films where I think that the cinema version is better than the book, because they took a lot of the Stephen King isms out of the tale, and by that I mean his odd directions with his stories. If you know, you know. Instead of outright saying what the threat was, the Shining movie never tells the audience what the force behind the hotel actually is. Are the members of the Torrance family actually being haunted at the Overlook Hotel, or are they slowly losing their minds due to isolation? We never get a straight answer, and I think that's perfect. But the most important thing is the hotel itself. The layout, the snowy landscape, the massive size, and the creepy emptiness make the area itself feel like a threat. The characters are constantly being watched because they live inside the danger. Another great example for a setting is Silent Hill, specifically the version which comes from Silent Hill 2. In many of the other games and movies, a cult is involved in some way, but not in Silent Hill 2. James goes to the town to find his wife, the one that has been dead for years. There are many reasons why James won't and can't leave. His dedication to his lost loved one prevents him from turning back. At the same time, Silent Hill itself seems to be keeping him from fleeing. To each of the characters in the story, the town appears to be different. They were drawn by their trauma and terrible decisions. Silent Hill didn't seem to be malicious in the game, it just seemed to give the people what they wanted. They wanted to be punished for the things that they have done. There was something magical about the city, but it was completely based on each individual. Silent Hill is more of a reflection than anything else at that point. If the characters didn't have a reason to stay, the entire story would fall apart. The scary thing about Silent Hill 2 is that the individuals don't even want to leave, which is far different than most tales. In the majority of horror movies, the people involved tend to want to get as far away as possible. Something gets in the way most of the time, whether it be monsters, weather, or unexplained phenomena. But sometimes it could be that there's nowhere to go. I think that's the scariest part of Alien. The characters are stuck in space. It isn't that the alien is the scariest part. If the characters were in a settlement or on a planet, the crew would be able to actually flee. They could find some place to hide. But while in a spacecraft, they have nowhere to go and no one is coming to save them. That's because the empty void of space is one of the most terrifying things imaginable. There's nothing that you can do to fight it. You have a better chance of fighting off a terrifying alien than surviving against the power of nature itself, or lack of nature in this case, however you want to think about it. It's the final frontier for a reason, and humanity has barely begun to conquer it. That's why a movie like Gravity can be so effectively tense. We're a long way away from viewing space as anything more than a threat. But we do have something that's like it that's far closer to home. In a lot of ways, the water is similar to space. Intense change in pressure, lack of oxygen, extreme darkness, except it does have one aspect that even space doesn't. Nothing can survive in space on its own, but there are creatures that live down in the deepest depths of the ocean. When we're in the water, we're in their element. At the same time, there is the fundamental weakness of water. It's called dry land. In Jaws, there is a simple solution to avoid the shark. Stay on land. Don't go swimming. While in the water, sharks are the most terrifying thing imaginable, but you don't think about them when you're on dry land. Unless it's Sharknado or something, but I don't think that actually counts. But being trapped in water is terrifying in itself. Think about games like Raft or Subnautica. I actually know people who can't play those games because they hate being isolated in water. It's actually too terrifying for them to enjoy the experience. And those aren't even horror games. Something like BioShock channels the fear of water with Rapture. Although the water isn't much of a threat, but it's a reason that people can't just leave whenever they want. In a way, the setting becomes an antagonist in its own right. That's right, the role of the villain can be placed solely on the setting itself because there are three major types of conflict in storytelling: human versus human, human versus self, and human versus power greater than human or self. Most of that is pretty self-explanatory. The protagonist is either fighting equal threats or themselves in some capacity. The greater power, however, can come in a lot of different forms. It could be giant monsters like in Pacific Rim. It could be an AI like in Space Odyssey. It could be ghosts like in The Haunting of Hill House. Or, as I have pointed out in this whole video, it could be the setting itself. Boom! Plot twist, I was lying. Characters are still the most important thing because the setting becomes a character in some stories. The people are most important because of human connection. The reason that being trapped in an unforgiving and hostile environment sounds so terrifying is because it's ingrained into us. Living things have always been fighting against the environment. It's a conundrum. We need it to survive, but it is always trying to kill us on a regular basis. We fought oceans, storms, mountains, deserts, and tundra. In a lot of ways, we've conquered nature, at least on Earth. Of course, you might argue that we've done this a bit too well. You know, we are killing the planet and everything, but it started the fight. We're just finishing it. Obviously, this is a joke. Please don't get mad at me. Adding all of this together, I think that the setting holds a special place in the importance of scary stories, more so than any other genre: fantasy, sci-fi, drama, and all of the others. It's important to make locations interesting, but it's not as integral to the story like in horror films. If the location isn't terrifying, then the tale just falls apart. A murderer isn't scary if the protagonist is in a police station filled with cops ready to shoot the killer. Sharks aren't scary on land. Survival is a lot less stressful on an ideal planet compared to the void of space. Ghosts won't be scary if they're haunting you in the brightest and happiest place imaginable. And monsters aren't as scary if the characters can get away from them with ease. All of this isn't to say that mundane locations can't be scary. Even your home could be terrifying if there's an angry mob outside of it trying to kill you. But in a lot of senses, the location of the scary story is just as important as the villain, or it could be tied to them, like in Nightmare on Elm Street. Once again, proving that characters are the most important thing. Because even the most terrifying of settings can fall apart if the characters are terrible. That's why most people that watch slasher films want to see the kills, because we actually want the bad guy to kill those idiots. So writers just need to make sure that the people involved in the story aren't insufferable or moronic. Otherwise, a horror story can become a comedy. But what do you think? Is the setting as important as I think? What's your favorite scary setting? Do you completely disagree with me? Leave a comment down below. I really want to hear your perspectives. And thank you so much for watching. If you like my takes on storytelling, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It would really help me out. Also, please remember that I will be self-publishing my novel, Dance of Frozen Death, at the start of 2023. I hope that you will check it out. I appreciate you. Do not despair.